Hey guys, welcome back. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Doing a little work in the shop today, and I wanted to make a video to explain to you why I cut the brand new dragster in half. I'll show you what went wrong, the mistakes I made, and like I said in my videos before, I'm not a professional fabricator. I learn as I go, and I do make mistakes, so I'm not above showing them to you. I don't leave them. I always correct them. So there was something about this that was bothering me, and there was too many things, so I'll just explain it to you. Here we go. First of all, got the 4-link car off of the jig, and I'm super excited about that. It is not fully finished welded, but it was at a point where I welded everything that I could get to. So it needs to be flipped anyway. So I decided to just put that to the side for a minute and start working on my car. So one thing you can see, and I'll show you this, one of the reasons why I cut the front end off of the new car. The wheels, I still have to set the toe on the alignment, but I'm super happy with the wheels. The way the front end came out and the wheels are upright. On that car, that front end, the right side spindle somehow got a little bit of negative camber put into it. So when you look at the wheel that way, on this side, if it leans in, that's negative camber. Leans out, that's positive camber. You really don't want any camber in a dragster. They just need to be straight up and down. So I got it right on this car, and I'll show you on the chassis jig what I changed so that I don't make that mistake again. So anyways, got the steering hooked up on this. Everything works great, and I'm super excited about that. So we'll get this car done eventually and get the body rehung on it, and then I'm gonna put it up for sale. I've had a couple people interested in it, and I don't know. Part of me kind of wants to keep it now, but I really don't need 2 cars. There is a difference. I'll explain that real quick. For people that don't know, I call this a 4-link car. Some people call them soft tail cars or swing arm cars, there's different kinds of swing arms, but these bars hook into those brackets, and then you've got coilover shocks. This is a really good design, and it's really great for tuning for different tracks, like lesser traction tracks and things like that. But it's a heavier design. There's a lot more working parts. These bars are like 0.95 wall thickness and chromoly ends. They're all heavy duty. The rear end's got extra bracing on it. 4 brackets per side, all welded together. You know, that's all 1/4-inch steel. Heavy duty stuff, which is great. It works great, but the name of the game in drag racing is lighter is faster. So the other difference is everything in the front is rigid because the only moving parts need to be in the back. And the reason for that is when the car launches, it wants to squat and it plants the tire down, makes the car go. So everything in the front is rigid. It's not that much heavier, but you do have those big diagonals through there. Some people do diagonals between the bays, but that car is a little heavier. The benefit to those cars is the wheelbase doesn't have to be as long. So that car's a 245-inch wheelbase. And one thing I'll show you, the front wheels are even with each other, meaning there's no stagger. So it's 245 wheelbase on either side. If you'll notice on this car, every time I'd post a picture of this online, people would ask me why I built it crooked. But that spindle goes straight out, or that A-arm goes straight out, this A-arm curves back. There's 1 7/8 inches of stagger built into the front end of this car. Stagger is, maybe I'll make a whole nother video on stagger, but there are benefits to it, and there's a 2-inch maximum allowed wheelbase stagger. So that side was 272. This side was 270 1/8. And the reason why I did that is I didn't want to set it up exactly at 2 inches because my fear was I'd get to some track and some tech official would have a different tape measure that's bent on one end or something like that and disqualify me for being, you know, a fuzz over 2 inches or something like that. So I left it an 1/8 inch shy. Better safe than sorry. So anyways, like I said before, that side had positive or negative camber to it just slightly, but it was enough that you could see when you put the wheels on it. That wheel leaned in just slightly. That's something that kept me up many nights, and I was gonna fix it. At first I thought about just cutting this front section off and redoing it, or just cutting that one A-arm off or whatever, because the kingpin bosses are welded in. That's all fully welded up, so there's no adjusting it. That was one part. The other thing, well, how a slip joint dragster works, you've got slip joints. So this used to be welded on here. So that piece was welded on there, and then that piece was welded on there, and then the upper frame rails just had a bolt through them. So everything in the back of the car is rigid. It's lighter. These are still 1/4 inch plates, but you have only got one on either side. And then on the rear end, you've got one on either side, and that bolt's that solid. So, and there's no extra bracing on the rear end because it really doesn't need it. Oh, the other thing, on the 4-link car, you've got a drive shaft with big heavy duty U-joints. On this, you have your transmission, into your transmissions like right here, and your rear end's right there, and you just have a little splined drive coupler. Way lighter. There's slip joints here that they work the same way as the front ones. Bolt goes through there, and I'll show you how those work. Everything on the lower frame rail is welded, except for those saddles right there. That upright's on a saddle, so as that frame arches, that can come apart and it doesn't get in a bind there. That thinner bar there just kind of bends a little bit. That's something that you have to keep an eye on. Lower frame rail's welded. Everything else is welded. But what I did was I used on, well, I'll show you this real quick. On chromoly, I set this up. On chromoly tubing, if it's 058 wall, which is 58 thousandths of an inch wall thickness, it telescopes in 1/8 inch increments. So that's 1 3/8 inches, that's 1 1/4 inches, that's 1 1/8 inches, and that's 1 inch. So that's how you can get those slip joints to slide. So you can see how easily that slides. So what you would do is you would have a bolt in here. If you don't want it to move at all, you tighten that bolt completely. There's a stop nut on that bolt, and say you want it to move a 1/2 inch, you just put that stop nut out a 1/2 inch, and you got slack in that bolt, and when the car launches, it tries to pick up the front end, the upper frame rails will actually slide out a little bit, allowing the car to arch up, which in turn plants the tire, just like the 4-link car does. Plants the tire, changes the pinion angle, which plants the tire, makes the car accelerate forward and get traction. So I thought that I wanted my lower frame rails to arch more, so that worked better. And so what I did was I used 1 1/4 inch 058 wall lower frame rails, just like the uppers, which is pretty standard tubing. That car has the same tubing on it, but everything's welded. So that car is completely rigid. You don't really need to use any heavier duty tubing than that, because it just makes it heavier. One thing to know about chromoly is a lot of people think it's lighter than steel, but it's actually the same strength, it's the same weight as steel. It's just like 80% stronger. So you can get by with thinner tubing and it being just as strong. So that's what makes it lighter. So anyways, on these uprights, they're welded to the top frame rail, but on the bottom frame rail, I put them on these slip tubes. And I thought that would let that free up and not bind. and it worked great. When I got the car down on the ground off the jig, I loosened those up a little bit. I put a floor jack underneath the driver's seat. I jacked it up, and those opened up great. That tube kicked a little bit. That tube kicked a little less. That one and that one didn't move at all. Everything in the front's welded solid. So those really didn't need to be slipped. These worked, but the problem was whenever I would lower the jack back down, those would go together, but those didn't want to go back in the same spot every time. I'd have to take a little mallet and bump them back or kick them with my foot or something like that. And that bothered me too, because that means that on a run, when the car launched, it would arch up, and then when it came back, those wouldn't necessarily return back every time, and it would leave the chassis in a weird bind. And so I don't think that was going to work that well. I don't know that it would have hurt me too much, but that was one more reason why. And I could have just welded those. I could have cleaned those up. They've got never sees all over them so that they didn't rust in there or anything like that. But I could have just cleaned them up, welded them, and that would have been fine. But the other issue was that's where it used to be welded to the driver compartment. That area right there, when I put the engine and transmission in it last spring, without me even sitting in it, when it was sitting on all four wheels, it sagged right there. And it pulled, well, it actually sagged all through there, and it actually pulled that down. And so I could tell that was not going to work. I was going to have to figure out some sort of diagonal system in there or something like that. And I just was racking my brain, and I thought, you know what? I mean, there's about maybe $350 worth of material there. And maybe a few days, realistically, of time figuring all that out and welding it all together. It wasn't worth just trying to fix that. I ultimately came to the decision to just cut it off, cut my losses. It's not wasted material. That there is not anything. I mean, the spindles will unbolt and I'll get the bushings out of that and everything, but that's all pretty much wasted. But these long runs in between these welds is good material, and I can cut that up, and I'll explain to you what I'm doing differently. So this car, or this front end, I decided to use, it's still 1 1/4 inch, so it slides inside that 1 3/8, but it's an 0.65 wall thickness. So that makes it 7/1000ths of an inch thicker wall than that. And that will add strength. It's not much, it doesn't add much weight, but it just makes it that much stronger. That'll add strength that won't let it bow whenever, because you got to figure I'm another 195 pounds with a SFI 15 fire suit and helmet and Hans device and gloves and everything like that. I'm going to be 215 probably in there. And I wasn't even in there and that was sagging. So I could tell that needed to be way stiffer. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my uprights at a little more of an angle, and I'm going to weld them top and bottom. I like to put them on, you can tell on this car over here, I still put the little sleeves on there. I just welded them. And I like to do that because I've seen where cars, when they're transported in the trailer and they bounce, they crack right behind the welds on the uprights on that lower frame rail. Over time, I mean, it takes years, but these cars last for years. You want them to last for years. There's a lot of money in them. So I think on this, and that really doesn't add, you're talking 8 of those on that 4-link car, 8 of those little sleeves. You're talking maybe, I mean, under a pound added to that whole car for that to make it that much stronger. So what I think I'm going to do is just weld straight to this because it's 7/1000ths thicker. I don't think I need to mess with those sleeves, and I think it'll be faster to build, and it'll weld up nicer, and I think ultimately it'll look nicer, and I think it'll be just fine. So I'm going to do that. I also added another cross member here that front end didn't have. It only had one cross member in the middle and the bottom. So I added that, and those are just 1-inch cross members. And then up here, I went ahead and stepped up to 1 3/8 and put sleeves in there, and that's a twofold deal. I like that because when you're welding those A-arms in, you do quite a bit of welding in there, and you can burn through 058 pretty easily. So that just makes it that much stronger when you're welding it. I don't plan on burning through to the second tube, but if I do accidentally do it in a spot, it's not the end of the world. But also, this car is going to wheelie, and every time it comes down, it's going to put stress on all of that. So making that much stronger. I mean, some people put their batteries up here. I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to put my battery. I'm building a fuel cell that's going to sit in here. A lot of people put, as much as 20, 25 pounds or so of ballast up here anyways. So beefing that up a little bit really doesn't hurt. The reason why you have to put weight in the nose is, well, first of all, the car's got to meet a minimum weight. It's got to be 1,650 pounds with me in it. I don't think I will have a problem with that, but you've got to have ballast in the nose because the car is going to wheelie. The reason for the longer wheelbase on these cars is so that they don't have to weigh as much, and they work better, because you need weight in the front end to get that car to arch. So if you think of trying to hold that down and rotating that up, that's what creates the arch motion. So the reason why this car is hanging off of the back of the dragster jig is because this is where the old uprights used to be for the spindles, and this is the 245-inch upright on that side. It had one on either side, and the brackets that I had that bolted all of that, I had them lined up as good as I could, but it was very hard to do because one set on this side of that bar, one set on that side of that bar, and it was very hard to get them perfectly level with each other and squared and everything like that. I thought I had it perfect, but obviously when I got it done, that one side was a little bit off. So I did this one completely different, and when you put them straight across, it's easy to put a 1-inch bar in there and verify that you're square here to that, and then back into that. I've checked it with a level my cross members and level that. Everything's great. So I remade this side, lined it up so it still has that, and then 1 7/8 inches further, I put another set of holes in there for the spindle. So you can see I put that bolt in there. You can see that lines up perfectly with that. And then when you come down here, it lines up perfectly with that. So it's going to be way better. I already know that side is perfect, and that's the side I had trouble with before. So I'm very confident that this is going to work way better. What I'm not exactly sure is oh, that reminds me, I didn't finish telling you about this. I'm pretty scatterbrained if you haven't noticed that, but since this is 1 1/4 065 tubing, nothing telescopes inside of it. Nothing that I have. I could do the math on it and figure that out, but I don't really need to, because that tube actually stops in here. And then this tube is 1 1/4 058 wall. So it looks like one continuous tube all the way through there, but it's actually 2 tubes. It'll be fully welded, doesn't affect anything, but then that's gonna allow me to step that down and finish out my nose piece out of 1-inch tubing. So that's a twofold deal why that's like that. But anyways, I took the opportunity while I'm doing it. I'm going to make this a 275-inch wheelbase car where it used to be a 272, since I haven't built the body for it yet. I just like that better, and it's just a little bit longer, and I think it's gonna look better. Oh, the other thing, I keep thinking of things. Probably should have made 2 videos, but that front end I made wider, and I didn't like how wide it was either. I really like the way this one looks, and I think that it's very proportional, even though this car is gonna have a longer wheelbase. That car was like 26 inches wide on the tires, and that car's 24 inches wide on the tires. So it's just an inch on either side, but it does make a difference. And so I'll show you the last thing. Like I said, I'm not a professional. I tried to measure. Normally there would be a rear end fixture with a bar that goes through. These are the bearings that mount in the rear end. I made a bar through there with collars and a fixture, and that would be right here. And you get that all lined up. I've got old 4-link bars on there that hook into these bolts here, and you can square that and line that up, mount a rear end in it. I've got a dummy 9-inch, where is it? Right there, that bolts into the rear end housing. And then I've got a 2.5-inch real heavy wall. It's like 3/8 wall DOM tube that I actually left outside in the cold one night in the back of my truck, and it froze and shrunk. And then I welded that tube to that pinion support, and these tubes had like a 6/1000 of an inch interference fit at room temperature. So that tube shrunk in the cold. That tube I heated cherry red with a torch, brought that inside. It fell right in there and lined up, and it is absolutely perfect, straight. So it's kind of redneck engineering, but that gave me my crankshaft bar to build this entire car off of. I mounted a mock-up LS block in it, aluminum block that I have, and built the entire car around that block. So everything lines up. What I don't know, since I'm not using that rear end fixture, is the exact center line of my axle. I measured off of the brackets. Ooh, sun coming through that window. Measured off the brackets there, and I got it really close. Hung a plumb bob off of there, and then put this piece of aluminum on there, and I've been using that to pull off of. I don't know if it's exact. Right now I am at 274 3/4. So this car is going to be roughly 275-inch wheelbase. I could be just slightly off here, so I'm not gonna stress too much about it. I do know that I have this square to the brackets there, so I can pull off either side and verify. Right now I do have exactly 1 7/8 inches of stagger from that aluminum bar to that hole, and that aluminum bar to that hole. So I know I'm square, and everything's done off of a string line that I've got pulled down. I've got braces, or I got wooden blocks under there to raise it up so it goes over all that tubing and doesn't hit anywhere. And every single place where I've got it clamped, and I've checked even between the clamps, I measure to that string line, and everything is exactly centered. And I'm building this car as professional as I can with the stuff I have. So anyways, if you have any questions about any of that stuff, like I said, the front end stagger, there's benefits to it. There's also benefits to having cars that don't have stagger. So you can ask those questions in the comments. Subscribe, like. I'm always willing to talk, always willing to answer questions. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but this is my passion. I love doing it, and I love sharing knowledge. So till next time, thanks guys.